What is up guys, Tim Murray here. So for those of you that have watched some of my videos over the past year or two, you may have noticed that I recently moved house and therefore my setup has been slowly changing ever since. Well, very recently I've once again made some big changes to my studio space, so I thought it'd be a good time to show you all what I'm using now in the form of a studio tour video. I'll have chapters enabled in this video for those of you that are only interested in one part of my setup, however there's a lot to unpack, so let's jump right in. Now straight off the bat, the biggest change to my studio space has definitely been the studio furniture. Previously I had a very big desk with built-in rack mounts which took up a large amount of space in the room. This was actually a DIY desk that I had built with my partner's dad, and it served me well over the years I used it. Of course it had a few quirks, which is naturally going to happen if it's a DIY project that I'm involved in. Like for example, the cable management was a piece of PVC gutter that I screwed to the back, and while it did hide a fair bit of the cabling, a lot of the cabling would just fall out of it and hang along the back wall. And also the keyboard tray, which once again was a part that I added, was perfect size for my Roli Seaboard controller, but nothing else, due to the fact that the tray was mounted very close to the desk, and the size was also restricted by the side cabinets. The speakers were sitting directly on the desk as well, although I did have foam underneath, and because the desk was quite large, there was actually no space to put isolation stands around it if I wanted to anyway. With that being said, I still really liked this desk. However, I was recently contacted by STL Pro Audio, which is a high-end audio store based in Wellington here in New Zealand, asking whether I'd be interested in trying out a Wavebone Headquarter studio desk in my room. I thought about it for a couple of days given I had a sentimental attachment to the old desk, but after measuring everything out, cleaning the room, and actually sorting my crap out, I decided it would be a really good idea. So a massive thank you to STL Pro Audio and Wavebone for sending me the Headquarter desk to check out. And with that being said, I've not been paid to say anything about this desk, and while they sent me the desk, I have still paid out of my own pocket for the Finn Rackmount unit, the grand Gemini speaker stands, and the additional cable management tray. So the Headquarter is currently Wavebone's flagship desk with 9 units of rack mount space, a 2-tiered shelf design, and also a height adjustable full-size keyboard tray. This keyboard tray in itself is basically a standalone desk, being able to fit a full-size 88-key keyboard on it. It's also a completely independent desk too, as it's got its own stand with wheels on the bottom to move it around. So if you don't really want to have a tray under your desk, you could actually tilt this sideways and use the desk as more of an L-shaped desk as well. Wavebone do also offer height adjustable desks, so theoretically you could actually use one of them to the side as well, so that you don't have to give up having the keyboard tray under your main desk. Before I did all of my cable management, I had my keyboard tray set up this way and it seemed pretty neat. And on the topic of cable management, everyone's favourite thing, the additional cable tray simply uses screws already used on the main desk, and allows you to hide cables and power bricks so they don't fall down the back wall and look messy. Safe to say the metal construction on this tray works a hell of a lot better than a plastic gutter too, so it doesn't bend under the weight of any of the power bricks. While it is an additional purchase beyond the desk, I'd fully recommend it if you're going to be utilising the rack mount capabilities of the desk. Even if you don't use the cable management tray, there are some holes on the back of the desk as well to route your cables through, and then simple cable ties will hide it up pretty nicely. The desk only took a couple of hours to put together completely, and while my partner did help with putting part of it together, this could also be assembled by yourself too. And unlike some other flat pack furniture building experiences, this one did not cause any arguments or frustration, which is an added bonus. The same of which can't be said for the console table that my partner recently bought. Now that thing was confusing. The Headquarter desk is built really solidly, like the framing is proper steel, so just be wary that some of the parts may be a tiny bit heavy if you do choose to venture into this one by yourself. 2 of the flat pack boxes were considered 2-person lifts, so just make a note of that. The other heavy part of this setup is definitely the monitor stands, and I'll say these were harder to assemble alone too. They're made to be heavy though, so they won't move around or wobble with the weight of your speakers, mine of which are KRK Rokit 6s. Like the keyboard tray, these stands are height adjustable too, which is good for many different seating positions. I've also got their Finn rack mount stand beside me, which I'll get to when discussing my synth setup. So moving on to what I've actually got on my main desk, I'm currently only utilising 3 of the rack mount spaces in the centre bit, and this is for my power conditioner, my Focusrite Clarett 8-pre USB, and this neat blanking plate that also doubles as a cable channel. The Furman powers pretty much everything to do with the PC, and also the audio interface and the speakers. The Clarett 8-pre is my main audio interface, and I've had no issues with it at all. Previously, I tried venturing into a Universal Audio Apollo for the main interface, but their Windows support was atrocious, so I sent it back pretty quickly. Like, if you have a Mac-based setup, the Universal Audio stuff will be great for you, but steer completely clear of it if you're on a Windows PC, in my opinion. It's not worth the unnecessary hassle. I spent unnecessary amounts of money replacing my motherboard and buying a Thunderbolt PCI card just to even try to get the thing to work, with no luck, so safe to say I have a pretty bitter experience with universal audio interfaces. I've also got a secondary audio interface which is the Focusrite Scarlett 18i20, but I'll get into that a bit later on in the video. And the only other things on my main desk currently are my Elgato Stream Deck controller for my macros and for being a pest in my mate's Discord channels with voice mod, my Audio Technica AT2050 mic mounted to a Rode boom arm, and also my Softube Console 1 and fader controllers, which control all of Softube's virtual channel strip plugins that I use on every channel in my mixes. Even if I'm only using the controllers for adjusting high pass or low pass filters in some instances, it's super convenient having it there and preloaded on every track in my mix. It's brought back a very useful workflow to my setup, which feels like it gives you more analog control whilst remaining purely digital. Like when you want to mix quickly, you don't want to have to faff around finding your EQ in your plugin menu, dragging it onto the channel, and then adjusting it with the mouse, when you can simply just turn 2 or 3 knobs immediately to adjust frequency, level, and Q settings. Now I will say that I use the original Console 1 controller way more than the fader controller, which I thought would be the complete opposite when I bought them, hence why the fader is on the keyboard tray and the original one is on the main part of the desk. If you're going to buy only one of them, my advice is to get the original one. It's completely powered by USB 2, whereas the fader controller is USB and external power. I also have this DJ TechTools MIDI fighter twister to my left, which is currently unused. However, I'm exploring options to make it control some key parts of my Ableton template. Like maybe I can make one of the knobs control tempo and some of the controls within the effects on my send track. I don't know exactly what yet, but I'll play around with it. And then on the keyboard tray underneath is my Roli Seaboard Rise 49 key MIDI controller. Now this thing is weird. I'll discuss it more when talking about my main software plugins, but to explain it quickly, this thing is essentially a squishy fretless piano. Seriously, that is the best explanation I can give. And now we'll move over to the right of my main desk, which is where my PC and rack mount stand are situated. The PC is my second custom build and it serves me very well. I'll have the full spec list on the side here and also in the description if you want to look any of it up yourself. Basically, I have no issues with running anything on this PC. Like for instance, one time I was playing a game with friends and I didn't realize I still had a very CPU intensive Ableton session open, and I also had DaVinci Resolve open with one of my video projects. Like, it just handles pretty much everything that I use it for. That being said, in the future, I reckon I'd want to maybe upgrade the graphics card in it just to get a little bit more performance in heavier video editing sessions, and also running newer game titles with max graphics settings with RTX enabled. I feel it is the current bottleneck of my entire setup. That was previously RAM, however, I've now got plenty in it, so I can now RAM load most samples in Ableton and take some pressure off my CPU and disk drives. Probably doesn't help the graphics card situation that I'm running 3 screens, which is a little bit excessive, I know, though I'd probably go back to just having 2 really decent monitors if I consider upgrading in the future. The bottom 2 monitors are LG 27-inch 1080p 60Hz IPS monitors, and the top monitor is a Titan Army 34-inch ultra-wide 1440p 100Hz VA monitor. And now moving over to the rack mount stand. The stand itself is a thin rack mount case by Wavebone. It has 13 units of rack mount space available, and it's also got the same wood finish as seen on the main desk and the speaker stands, so it ties in quite nicely with the rest of the room. What I've done with this stand is make it so that all of my synths, pedals, Scarlett interface and my Ableton push are all on their own USB hub and power supply. That way I can turn off the entire unit using the multiboard I've put inside, so I don't need to have everything on when I just want to use my PC. When I'm not making music, I don't need all of these wasting power, so I'm definitely happy I opted for this setup. I've also got the Scarlett interface set up in standalone mode, with it sending its 8 inputs into the Clarett via a single ADAT cable. Also in the future, if I want to add some rack effects to the setup, I can use the 8 outputs on the back, and also I can run them as inserts through the Neutrik patch bay at the bottom of the rack. I'm very happy with this rack mount stand. I would highly recommend one if you need some more space for rack mount gear. I've still got a few rack mount spaces available too, so if you've got any ideas on what I could fill it with, let me know in the comment section below. I've been thinking of venturing into the Synergy amps ecosystem by getting the Syn 2 rack unit, and I'd definitely get a Fryette Pitbull Ultra lead for my first module, but let me know what you'd recommend for the second preamp spot. And before we venture down to the pedal board, I've got some synths on this rack stand also. My first synth was a Roland System 1M, which is a rack mount synth that also has some CV I/O options for those venturing into Euro rack modules. Thankfully I haven't done that yet, as I don't think my wallet would cope with that sort of stress. But the System 1M is a relatively versatile synth, but I wouldn't say I rate it as a high tier synth by any means. It just gets the job done and that's about it. My second synth, however, is a different story. The Korg Minilog XD is an analog and digital crossover synth, which has all of the bells and whistles of the original Minilog, but also a digital oscillator and digital effects. The digital side of the synth is fully programmable if you know the coding language for it too, so the sky's the limit with this unit. I've played a show with this synth live when helping out my mate with his music project, and it worked really well to the point where he actually bought one as well. I'd fully recommend Korg if you're looking into getting into some hardware synths without the hefty price tag. And so down we move to the Pedalboard, which itself is a pedal train Metro 20. It is powered by a Strymon power supply, though I only realised after I received it that I bought the wrong one. There's one that's a lower profile that fits the Metro 20, just not the one that I bought. So it wouldn't sit on the floor properly. Rather than send it back, which I wouldn't want to do anyway seeing as it was my error, I added some rubber chair leg protectors to the back of the pedalboard to raise it. Now works perfectly. Of course, the main brain of my setup is the Line 6 HX Stomp. It's a great piece of kit and is basically a less powerful Helix in a smaller form factor. Seeing as I wanted to have specialised individual pedals for certain effects anyway, the DSP limit wasn't an issue at all. It's merely there to route my signal and apply some extra effects should I need it. And moving on to the dedicated pedals, I've got my Dark Glass X Ultra, Dark Glass Atom, Dark Glass Hyperluminal Compressor, and Dark Glass Element. I should once again say a big thank you to STL Pro Audio over here in New Zealand. He's the official retailer for Dark Glass in New Zealand and is fantastic to deal with. A heads up that I have been sponsored to do demos on the Atom and the Element for STL before, and he is also the distributor for Wavebone studio furniture. While there may be a potential bias because of that now, this relationship stemmed from me buying the Hyperluminal and X Ultra through his store in the first place. Regardless of sponsorship, I'd be supporting his store, so check him out via the links in the description and tell him Tim Murray sent you. Then moving on, we've got the Horizon Devices Nano Attack and Flux Echo pedals. The Nano Attack is an absolute beast of a pedal and is essentially the attack knob from the Precision Drive in a smaller form factor. I've got a video on this pedal, check it out via the link in the description. The Flux Echo I haven't used too much, though I think there's an issue with it being on the Strymon power supply, as sometimes it glitches and doesn't boot up correctly. Usually fixes when I run it on a separate power supply, but it's a bit annoying really. And now that we've looked at all of my hardware effects and PC setup, it's time to look at what's actually on my PC for my music production. Straight off the bat, Ableton Live is my go-to DAW. I've used it for years, I love using it, and I don't see myself changing anytime soon. It does everything that I need from it, and I've gotten so used to the workflow that between Ableton's shortcuts and the Softube Console 1 controllers, I can now very quickly get tracks to how I want them to sound. I also have experience with Logic, Pro Tools and Cubase through studying, but I found I just didn't gel with them as much as Ableton. It's also quite sad to think that one of the last books that I read was legitimately the entire Ableton Live user manual. I'll say that the character development was definitely lacking, but I sure as hell know most shortcuts within the software now, so I'll take that as a win. Venturing into Ableton, there's a few different plugin suites that I use religiously in my music. Now I'm not going to go through every plugin that I use because that would take ages, but I'll briefly go over a few that I really recommend. First off, I have the Native Instruments Complete Ultimate Collector's Edition bundle, so I frequently use the Kontakt and Reactor libraries within that, and I also pretty much have at least one instance of Replica XT Delay and ROM Reverb on every single track I publish. They just sound fantastic, and I know what each setting does, so the workflow is once again quite efficient as well. Next in line is definitely various plugins from Plugin Alliance. I've only recently started using these, but found I really like using most of the Brainworks plugins, and also a couple of other Dynamics plugins that Plugin Alliance sells. If I create a group bus for certain sections of my music, you can pretty much guarantee one of these plugins is on the bus. I would also highly recommend Adapter Audio's plugins for metering and referencing mixes. Seriously, watch a video about metric AB and thank me later. Moving on, I've also got Isotope's music production bundle, so I've got Ozone 9 and Neutron 3 available. I do use Ozone a fair bit to give me an idea of where to start with mastering, but I find I use the Neutron 3 EQ the most. Definitely my favourite dynamic EQ at the moment. And now over to my amp sims, I frequently use ML Soundlab's amped plugins. Full disclosure here, I've done a fair few videos with ML Soundlab before, including a couple of sponsored videos, so my opinion on them may be a little biased. However, I have no issues with them, they're great plugins to work with, and the Miko 2 cabinet plugin alone is insanely good. I'll put some links in the description for you to check out. I definitely recommend Amped Roots as a good starting point, but I also find I use Oracle, Icon and Flagship a lot also. And finally, some honourable mentions. For drums, I use ML Drums for my main tone, but then also sometimes sample reinforce with Native Instruments Action Strikes and Butch Vig drums, or even some samples I have accumulated from my ventures into electronic music. My main synth plugins would have to be Xfer's Serum and Equator 2 by Roli. Seeing as I have a Roli Seaboard Rise controller, I get the full potential from Equator's MIDI polyphonic expression functionality. These things can be a little expensive and definitely a bit niche, but they are incredibly fun to to use, albeit a bit difficult to play like a normal keyboard given it's an all-silicon surface. And I also use the Seaboard controller to work out certain notes in MIDI, for example when I program in MIDI bass lines to follow what my guitar is playing. And on that, I frequently use Solemn Tone's Loki bass or Mayo bass and then process it with Neural DSP's Parallax plugin. I've also dabbled with Umansky bass from Submission Audio, but all of them will yield some serious results. Like, yes, I have two basses within arm's reach behind me and I still do record with them. However, having my guitar lines translated to MIDI and then adapted for these MIDI bass plugins is super convenient when it comes to layering it with other synths, something which I do rather frequently. And last plugin to mention would have to be Sound Theory's Gullfoss. This plugin seriously feels like cheating when it comes to mixing. Like, I'd get my mixes to 90% of the way I wanted them to sound, and then always struggled to get that final 10% done. Now I just put Gullfoss at the very start of my master chain and let it work its magic. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't use this to clean up a bad mix, I would merely use it to add that final 10% on. Something I like to do with it is actually bypass it when I reckon it sounds good, so that I can try get my mix to that point without having to really rely on it. So in that sense, it's actually a great plugin for sort of steering you in the right direction tonally. It's more on the expensive side for a plugin, but try it out for yourself and see what you think. And now finally moving on to my guitar rack, and I've actually got two of them. I have one 7 guitar rack that's directly behind my setup, and these are the guitars that I grab the most. Firstly, we've got my Warmouth 6-string bass build. This is a Gecko 6-string with a 35-inch scale length, Nordstrand built Dingwall FD3 pickups, a dark glass tone capsule preamp, and it can be changed from active to passive and series to parallel via 2 push-pull knobs. I've got a full video on this beast, so check it out via the link in the description. Next in line I have my ESP LTD D6, which has been converted to fretless by myself. The story about this one is that a mate of mine who I studied audio engineering with had defretted this bass with the hopes of converting it himself. He hadn't got around to finishing it and was looking to get rid of it, so he just gave it to me without the frets installed, and I used wood filler and epoxy resin to seal the board myself, and here we are. I have also since swapped out the active electronics and pickups in favour of a passive setup for this one with a kill switch button and 2 switches to swap both pickups between series, parallel and single coil wiring. Moving on, we've got one of my favourite guitars I've ever owned, which is the Squier Jazzmaster Baritone. This is a 30-inch scale beast which I have tuned to D standard tuning, although a full octave lower than regular guitar D standard tuning. I've achieved this with Stringjoy's bass VI string set, and I've got no gripes with this setup when tuned this low. I've modified it with some aftermarket knobs and also a kill switch from Iron Age Accessories, but to be honest, I really don't like the kill switch on this, and I'll probably either get a custom pickguard made without the switch. I really like some of the designs from Indra Guitars on Instagram, for example, or I'll replace it with a kill switch from another company. The button is just way too stiff for a kill switch, so I've used it in like only one song because of this. Next we have my Solar Guitars A1.8C, which I also really enjoy using. I've also got a full video on this one, so the link will be in the description for that. Only gripe as such that I have with this guitar is that I'm not a massive fan of the tone of the pickups in humbucking mode, so I'd probably swap them out for Lundgren M8s if money permitted. Generally I just EQ my guitar DI before my amp sim, so it's not a major thing for me anyways. Another thing is that with the Evertune bridge system, while fantastic for keeping it in tune, is a bit of a faff to change between tunings, and also you can only go up to a certain string gauge with it as well. If I were to get another 8 string, I would probably go for one without the Evertune, I reckon. Don't get me wrong, I'm quite happy I've got one guitar with an Evertune, but I definitely wouldn't want the system on all my guitars. Moving on once more, we've got my Ibanez RGD iX6 MPB. No, that is not my Wi-Fi password, that is its model name. So the guitar is actually one that I won in a raffle on Instagram via Giant Guitars. I remember I had entered a couple of his raffles before, like there was a Fender Telecaster one in particular that was super nice, which was how I found Giant Guitars on Instagram to begin with, and I saw this Ibanez one come up one day and I thought, well, that looks kind of cool. So I chucked a few bucks on it and got a couple of tickets, not giving it too much thought after that. Then a couple of days later, I remember I woke up a few hours before my alarm was due to go off, checked my phone to see what the time was, saw I had a few notifications from Giant Guitars, and then realised I'd actually won the guitar. I went from being half asleep to wide awake and trying not to lose my shit within the space of a few milliseconds, all while trying to be as quiet as possible as to not wake up my partner, which I'm pretty certain I failed at if I recall correctly. Great guitar, no issues with it, though I'd buy the 7-string model if I was to actually buy one myself. And once again, a big shout out to Giant Guitars. You definitely made my month back then. Next we've got my Warmouth Telecaster build. This thing has a few tricks up its sleeve, which was part of the reason I wanted to build it. So it's got a bare knuckle silo in the bridge and a flat 50 in the neck, however then it's also got a Graphtec acoustophonic system in the bridge, so it's also got piezo on board. Furthermore, it also has a stereo output jack, so if you use a stereo to dual mono breakout cable, you can actually send the magnetic and piezo pickups through different effects processing chains. effectively being able to fully change guitar tones with the selector on the guitar. Once again, I've got dedicated videos on this, so check the links in the description. Next is a rather sentimental guitar to me. This is my Gibson Les Paul Black Beauty. This is a Chinese-made Gibson copy that my dad bought me for my first electric guitar. So not only as this is my first electric, but also that my dad has now passed away since, I don't see myself ever getting rid of this thing. Even if I don't play it much, given the shorter Gibson style scale length makes drop tuning a bit harder, every time I do play it, I get quite a bit of joy out of it. For a Chinese knockoff, it actually plays really well. Next is when we move into the wardrobe space, where some of my other instruments are stored that don't really get played as often, and to be honest, I'd consider selling both of these guitars. First is the Ibanez RG8. This guitar has served me well over the years and is a great budget 8-string, however it doesn't get much use anymore as the Solar 8-string is just a much nicer guitar to play. I've got a set of 9-string gauge strings that I may chuck on it, given it has the bass size ferrules on the back for the lower strings, which might give me a bit of motivation to play it again. And my final guitar is the Schecter C7 Hellraiser. This one is a difficult one for me, as it's been signed by Jeff Loomis from Arch Enemy and Nevermore when I met him back at a guitar clinic in 2012. Which was a really rough year for me as well. Now I've also completely swapped out the electronics in this guitar, as I really didn't like the EMG 707s that were in it as stock. So it now has a set of Fishman Fluence Tosin signature pickups, and also a kill switch from Tezzy Switch, which I find much nicer than the Iron Age one on my Jazzmaster. I also wired it in with a 5-way super switch and the push-pull, so I have access to all 3 voice modes, including the amazing sounding single coil modes. However, I'm still not a massive fan of the regular humbucking modes on the pickups, and also not a big fan of the feel of the guitar when compared to my other guitars. Now I'm sort of torn where it has the signature on it and I've spent money on upgrading the electronics, but still barely ever play it because I don't seem to gel too well with it nowadays. And lastly, we've got my curveball instruments, which are my Irish bouzouki and mandolin. Now while I don't play these often, they're super fun instruments to play. They're also both acoustic electric, so if I really want, I can run these through guitar multi-effects and get some rather non-traditional tones. So the bouzouki I bought from Furman and the mandolin is from Rondo Music. And finally, the last thing I'll touch on is my camera gear. Now my main camera is a Sony Alpha A6300, which came with a 16 to 50mm lens as stock. I've opted for a Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens, which really took this camera to the next level. It has really good low light performance and is relatively simple to use as well. My biggest gripe with this camera is that it's the model that was prone to overheating. So sometimes you can only use it for continuous recording for say like 20 to 30 minutes or so before warning symbols appear and stop your recording. There is a way of getting around this, which is to use an external battery and then put a dummy battery in the actual camera itself. I can now do this too, as my on-camera monitor that I use to see myself when recording has a Sony NP F960 battery mount on it, and can also send power from the monitor via a dummy battery. The final piece of kit that I use on my camera is a Parrot teleprompter, so that I can sound significantly more confident in what I'm talking about. Long story short, I'm great at writing things down, but terrible at getting thoughts out verbally, which is only further negatively affected by the camera recording in front of me. This teleprompter is great, as previously I was using my partner's iPad under my lens, which not only casted light, but also you could tell I was looking down when I recorded talking videos. And finally for lighting, I use a mixture of GVM light panels and these Nanlite ParvoTube T8 7Xs, which I'm hoping to get linked up via DMX so I can synchronize lighting changes with my Ableton sessions. You may notice I haven't mentioned the Prime Acoustic London 8 panel kits I have on my walls, and that's because I'm still not 100% happy with the acoustics in this space. I definitely need to get more panels at some point, but I also have to ensure that they're placed correctly in the room, as initially I went slightly more down the aesthetic route rather than properly calculating exactly where they should be placed within the room. I'll be working on that one in the future. And that brings us to the end of this brief overview of all of the gear in my studio space. If there's any pieces of gear that you want me to do a full video walkthrough on, or even something you just wish to see me use more, write it down in the comment section below and I'll see what I can do for you. Once again, a massive thank you to Wavebone and STL Pro Audio for sending me the Headquarter desk to check out. I absolutely swear by them now that I've tried their stuff, so check out the rest of their catalogue via the link in the description. So thanks for watching and have a wonderful day. Timmy out.